Our next guest has been closely following the impact and causes of the economic meltdown. Robert Scheer, editor at truthdig.com, author of many books, including The Pornography of Power: How Defense Hawks Hijacked 9/11 and Weakened America. His latest column is called Where's the Community Organizer We Elected? He joins me here in Burbank, California. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Robert Scheer. Okay, just talk about these figures, from hunger to Goldman Sachs.
Well, first of all, I mean, the whole thing about the profit of Wall Street that makes it particularly obscene is that we gave them that money. Your previous guest talked about how China is carrying $800 billion of our debt. We're running up a $1.4 trillion deficit. And what happened was we threw a lot of money at Wall Street. In particular, in relation to Goldman, we had this buyout of AIG, $180 billion. We've guaranteed the toxic assets of these enterprises. And that money, in a really, truly shameful way, was passed on directly to the very companies that you mentioned that are giving themselves profit. So there's something, yes, I'll use the word obscene. It's also interesting that he should say he's doing God's work. My friend, the head of Goldman Sachs, and my goodness, if Scripture is clear on anything, it's condemnation of those who take advantage of the poor. You know, after all, Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple. Scripture is devastating in its condemnation of usury, the immorality of usury, and yet in your promo you mentioned Chris Dodge trying to get a bill passed that would cap interest rates. If you know, where is the Christian right? Where are the Christians? Where are the Jews, for that matter, or the Muslims? At least the Muslims in their religious practice don't believe in interest as a principle, but the idea that we're jacking up credit card to 30, 35, this is loan sharking, and we can't even get a bill passed through Congress that would cap interest payments. The other thing is their rationalization is they're somehow saving the economy. It's the old blackmail thing. They ruined the economy. They got the legislation, the radical deregulation they wanted that permitted them to become too big to fail, Citigroup and these companies. And then they turn around and say, if you don't throw all this money at us, the economy is going to go into the Great Depression. But they haven't solved the main problems. Mortgage foreclosures this month are higher than they've been in 10 months. We have the commercial housing market exploding, you know, apartment building rentals exploding, going into mortgages. And so, you know, they are not dealing with the fundamentals. What has happened is an incredibly expensive Band-Aid was put on this, and these people don't even have, they're not even embarrassed. And the reason I wrote that column is they've also captured the president. And, you know, I voted for this president. I even contributed money that I didn't have to his campaign. You know, I still feel great that he's the president. You know, I'm biased. I like the guy, you know. I like everything about him.
You ask, where's the community organizer?
I'm appalled. This is not a minor criticism. I think the guy's betraying his own presidency, the promise of his presidency, because he has taken these thieves, and I use the word advisedly. You know, I think people like Lawrence Summers, who pay themselves, you know, maybe he's not legally a thief, but, you know, guy pays himself or gets paid from hedge funds and other people $15 million in 08 while he's advising Obama about the economy. And he's the guy who, more than anyone else, when he was Secretary of the Treasury in the Clinton administration, pushed through the radical deregulation that allowed these businesses to get in all this trouble and refused to regulate derivatives and all that sort of thing. And then these guys are made the head of the, what, they're going to save us now? And so you have the one I attacked, particularly Neil Wolin, who was the general counsel of Hartford, but before that he'd been the general counsel to the Treasury Department. He's now deputy secretary of the Treasury, and he's the guy who pushed through the reversal of Glass-Steagall. He wrote the actual words in, you know, the Graham Leach-Bliley Act, and now he's our deputy, and he condemns. The point of the column was that there's actually a chance to do something now. Chris Dodd has finally seen the light. He is the most important. Well, he is
running for re-election.
Yeah. Running for election.
Ralph Nader could run against him,
right,
possibly.
And he's also under pressure because he did get insurance money and all that sort of thing. But the fact is, he's got a bill that makes sense, which is, you know, the Fed has been at the center of the problem. Ron Paul is right. The libertarians are right. You know, the Fed is out of control. It has a higher degree of secrecy than the CIA. We don't know what they're doing with our money. There's no accountability. Basically, it's run by the banks themselves on the regional level. They're the ones that are listened to. And what's happened is that Chris Dodd said, no, you got to take power away from the Fed, and you have to put a new agency that will control these too big to fail agencies, and the administration is opposed to it. I mean, I know why they're opposed to it.
The administration's opposed to it, and the Republican senators are opposed.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why are they opposed to it?
Because they think that they like business as usual. I mean, they're for Wall Street going its own way. They haven't learned the lesson that capitalism uncontrolled is capitalism destroyed. You know, in particular, I really found your previous interview on the China thing fascinating. And why is China doing well? You know, this is a startling lesson here, because we were always told unbridled capitalism is the best capitalism. Well, the Chinese have a marriage like Western Europe, but even more so, of government and the free market. It's not unbridled capitalism. And they've been able to come out of this recession that we created. Is an incredible object lesson here. These commies over there were able to take the capitalist energy and free market model and control it to a considerable degree, and they have an 8–10% growth rate now at a time when we're floundering. I go back to Obama and the point in my column. He has betrayed his own, what is it? It wasn't the revolution, but his own promise. You know, he gave a speech at Cooper Union in 2008, in March of Cooper Union. This was 2 months after Robert Rubin, the mentor of all of these people, said there's no problem. We don't have any flap in the economy. It's just a little mild blip. And Obama gave a speech that was right on. You could give that speech now and it'd be on target. He blamed Wall Street. Radical deregulation, and then inexplicably, when he got the nomination, he turned to these very same people that had created the problem and said, okay, now you get us out of it. And they're not doing, you know, maybe if they'd gotten religion, maybe if they'd learned their lessons, you know, maybe if they were a different breed, but they're not, you know. And this Neil Wolin, he attacked Chris Dodd, and, you know, and they say, oh, you're going to create nervousness for Wall Street. You know, that was the word they used. You're going to make Wall Street nervous. I want to make Wall Street nervous. You know, the next time these guys figure out another way to fleece us, they should worry they're going to get caught. Maybe they won't do it.
What about this new government report that's found Goldman Sachs could have suffered dramatic losses if the federal government hadn't intervened to bail out AIG?
Look what happened. Lehman was Goldman's competitor, was allowed to go belly up, okay? The Secretary of the Treasury was a former head of Goldman Sachs, but Robert Rubin was a head of Goldman Sachs, okay? And Paulson was the head of Goldman Sachs. They decide not to, you know, and Rubin was involved in these discussions, Lawrence Summers, Paulson, so forth. Timothy Geithner, who was our Secretary of Treasury, was head of the New York Fed for 5 years while all this was going on. So they say, let Lehman go, you know, down the tubes, which is great for Goldman Sachs, because now you have basically two investment houses that are getting all the business. And on the other hand, we'll put all this money into AIG, which was backing these junky derivatives, these, you know, mysterious packages, and it'll be a pass-through. People won't notice because we're giving it to AIG. $180 billion of our taxpayer money. We taxpayers get nothing in return. AIG is still in the toilet. But Goldman got its money. You know, it got upwards of $20 billion that they don't have to pay back. They make a big thing about we're going to pay back some of the TARP funds and everything. And by the way, they were allowed to become a bank. No hearings, no judicial proceedings, and so forth. You know, the very thing Lehman was asking for, let us become a bank so we can get some of these TARP funds and everything, that was granted to Goldman Sachs. You know, Ron Paul, by the way, who's been trying to go after the Fed, and he has an accountability piece of legislation that the Democrats have gutted, and said, let's have an audit of the Fed. Let's find out what does the Federal Reserve do? What are the deals they made? Where did the money go? We don't have that. And the Inspector General of the Treasury Department, the Inspector, you know, Elizabeth Warren, all of these people have pointed, from the Congressional Oversight Panel, all of these people point out, we don't have the facts. We don't know where the trillions are going. We know trillions have been committed. We know all of these huge pools. Bank of America's $300 billion of toxic assets have been backed up, but there's no accountability. I have covered the CIA, I've covered national security, and I've covered banking. I did it for the LA Times in one way or another for 30 years, okay? It is more difficult to cover Wall Street in terms of secrecy and classification and their protection than it is to cover the CIA and the Pentagon. That much I'll tell you. You know, you got greater claim on the truth covering the Pentagon, as I did in my last book, than I'm having in my current book called The Great American Stick-Up that Nation Books is publishing. And, you know, these people know it's proprietary. It's our business. It has nothing to do with you. And that goes for the Fed, which is supposed to be a government agency. And so for Chris Dodd to say, no, we have to take power away from the Fed. We have to create a new independent agency to supervise these too-big-to-fail institutions to make sure that they don't go belly up and we taxpayers pay for them again. he's absolutely right. And people watching this, if there's one thing they should demand from the Obama administration, is get behind the Dodd bill on taking power from the Fed and creating a new publicly accountable agency. That's absolutely critical. Without that, we're not going to get out of this mess, and we're not going to prevent the future one.